When the final movement came, the woman allowed the music to slow naturally, as if it were choosing its own ending, rather than being directed toward one, and her hands moved with gentle certainty, touching the keys with gratitude and care. And the broken piano responded with a soft, uneven voice that felt sincere and complete. And the melody returned briefly to its simplest form, echoing the very beginning but now shaped by everything that had come before. And the audience felt the meaning immediately because the sound carried understanding, acceptance, and quiet fulfillment, and no one felt the need to anticipate applause or reaction, because the moment asked only to be honored, and the woman at the piano remained still within herself, her breathing calm, her posture relaxed, and she felt a deep sense of peace knowing she had spoken truthfully through the only language that had ever fully understood her, and she thought of her long life of quiet work, responsibility, and sacrifice, and she no longer saw it as something that had taken music away from her, but as something that had given music depth and purpose. And the audience sensed the sincerity of this conclusion and remained completely silent, allowing the final notes to fade gently into the room. And when her hands finally lifted from the keys, she did not rush or seek acknowledgement, and she sat quietly for a moment, honoring the sound as it disappeared. And the room stayed still, not because anyone was instructed to wait, but because everyone felt the moment deserved respect. And then, slowly, almost hesitantly, people began to stand, not with loud applause at first, but with a shared understanding and appreciation that grew into sustained, heartfelt clapping. And the woman looked up for the first time, meeting the eyes of those around her, and she did not see judgment or amusement, but warmth, gratitude, and respect. And she smiled softly, not in triumph, but in connection. And in that moment, the joke that had started the evening was fully transformed into a lesson that stayed with everyone present. That talent often lives quietly, that humility does not diminish strength, and that broken things, when treated with care, can still create something meaningful and lasting. And the woman left the piano not as a performer seeking recognition, but as herself, fully seen and valued. And the audience carried the experience with them long after the hall emptied, and the broken piano sat silently once more, but no longer forgotten, because it had been part of something honest and real, and that night became a story people told, not about surprise or shock, but about listening more closely and honoring what does not announce itself. And the woman returned to her life unchanged in routine, but deeply affirmed in spirit, knowing that her gift had never needed permission to exist, and that quiet dedication has its own enduring power. And if any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content without them. As the music carried on, the woman felt a subtle shift within herself, a sense that she was no longer only revisiting the past or expressing quiet endurance, but was now standing fully in the present moment. And that awareness changed the way her hands touched the keys, because there was less hesitation and more openness, and the next passage emerged with a clearer tone, not louder but more assured, and the audience sensed this change immediately as the melody took on a steadiness that felt grounded and honest. Broken piano continued to respond unevenly yet faithfully, and she adjusted instinctively, allowing her fingers to guide the sound rather than force it. And the music began to reflect a life shaped by balance between duty and self-respect. And listeners felt this balance in the rhythm that neither rushed nor lingered, and the room remained silent yet alive with attention, and the woman playing felt connected to the space, not as a performer seeking approval, but as a person sharing something real and long held. And she remembered moments when she had doubted the value of her devotion to music, because it brought no recognition and no tangible reward. And yet in this moment she understood that those years of quiet commitment had given her something deeper than applause, and the realization settled gently within her and shaped the warmth of the notes she played. And the audience continued to listen with care, and a few people felt their breathing align with the rhythm of the music without realizing it, and the carpenter noticed his shoulders relax as if the sound had eased a tension he carried daily, and the woman in the middle rows felt a steady calm replace the earlier ache, because the music now spoke of acceptance rather than loss, and the teenage girl felt a sense of clarity, imagining a future that did not require abandoning one part of herself for another. And the music teacher felt humbled by the depth of expression coming from someone who had never sought a stage, and he recognized that true musicianship often grew quiet places away from formal recognition. And the man who had laughed earlier now watched with sincere admiration, his earlier assumptions fully dissolved and replaced by respect and gratitude. And the woman at the piano remained composed, her posture relaxed, her movements economical and expressive. And she introduced a new motif that felt reflective yet forward, moving like someone acknowledging where they have been while continuing to walk ahead. And the broken keys created occasional rough textures that she integrated seamlessly, allowing them to add honesty rather than distraction. And the melody unfolded with patience, revealing layers of experience without overwhelming the listener. And the hall seemed to absorb the sound gently, and the sense of shared presence deepened further, and the woman felt a quiet confidence that surprised her, not because she doubted her ability, but because she had not felt the need to express it openly in so long. And she allowed that confidence to exist without turning it into performance. And the music reflected that restraint with clarity and warmth, and the audience responded with deeper stillness and attention. And a few listeners felt tears gather, not from sadness, but from recognition, because the music mirrored their own lives filled with effort rarely acknowledged, and choices made quietly and responsibly. And the woman at the piano continued shaping the piece with subtle variations, returning briefly to earlier themes now altered by growth and understanding. And the audience recognized these echoes, instinctively feeling the continuity of the story being told. And the teenage girl smiled softly, sensing hope rooted in realism rather than fantasy, and the music teacher felt inspired to honor quieter forms of talent in his work. And the carpenter felt pride in the dignity of persistence. And the woman in the middle rows felt affirmed in her sacrifices, and the man who had suggested the joke felt resolved to approach others with more humility and curiosity. And the woman playing felt none. This individually yet sensed the collective connection through the stillness of the room and the responsiveness of the atmosphere. And she allowed herself to lean slightly into the keys, drawing out a warmth that felt earned rather than forced. And the melody carried a gentle strength that resonated deeply, and the broken piano seemed to offer its best voice within its limits, and she met it with patience and respect. And the sound filled the hall with a quiet assurance that life lived sincerely holds its own beauty. And as this part of the performance continued, the sense of time seemed to soften, and no one checked watches or shifted seats, and the shared experience felt complete in itself. And the woman realized that regardless of what happened next, this moment had meaning, because it affirmed something she had always known but rarely seen reflected: that quiet dedication carries value even when unnoticed. And that realization brought her a deep sense of peace, and she continued playing with that understanding guiding her hands, and the audience remained fully present, aware that they were witnessing not just a performance but a life expressed through sound, and that awareness bound them together in shared respect and gratitude. And the music continued to unfold naturally, carrying the story forward with honesty and restraint, and the room held the sound gently, allowing it to resonate fully, and the woman remained centered, her breathing steady, her expression calm and focused. And as this section moved toward its close, the melody softened slightly, not ending but preparing for what was to come, and the audience sensed the transition and remained attentive and open. And the story told through music continued to deepen, leaving an impression that would endure long after the final note. And if any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content without them. The woman felt the music naturally guiding her toward a deeper and more revealing place, and she did not resist it because years of quiet practice had taught her to trust where sound wanted to go. And the next section began. Slower, more deliberate pattern that felt introspective and grounded. And the audience sensed immediately that this part carried greater emotional weight, not in a dramatic or overwhelming way, but in a steady, honest manner that invited reflection. And the broken piano responded with tones that were uneven yet expressive, and she worked with them intuitively, allowing the character of the instrument to shape the mood rather than distract from it. And the melody carried a sense of lived experience shaped by responsibility, endurance, and quiet resilience, and listeners felt drawn inward, as if the music was encouraging them to look honestly at their own lives without judgment. And the room remained still and attentive, and the earlier casual atmosphere felt far removed, replaced by a shared seriousness that was calm rather than heavy. And the woman at the piano remained composed, her breathing steady and her movements precise and unhurried. And she remembered periods in her life when she felt invisible, not because she worth, but because she chose stability and care over attention. And she remembered long days at work followed by evenings spent quietly playing for herself, not as an escape, but as a way to process emotions she did not have time or space to express openly. And those memories flowed naturally into her playing, now giving depth to each phrase. And the audience, unaware of the details, still felt the truth behind the sound, because sincerity does not require explanation. And the carpenter listened closely, feeling the rhythm mirror the steady pace of his own days, and he felt a quiet pride rise within him, recognizing his own strength reflected in the music. And the woman in the middle rows felt a gentle ease because the melody acknowledged effort without asking for validation, and she felt understood in a way she rarely experienced. And the teenage girl felt a mix of inspiration and seriousness, realizing that adulthood carried complexity but also dignity. And she watched the pianist with admiration rooted not in glamour but in authenticity, and the music teacher felt deeply moved, recognizing a level of emotional maturity that could not be taught through technique alone. And he felt grateful to witness such honesty expressed so naturally. And the man who had earlier laughed now sat with his back straight, and his attention fully fixed on the woman at the piano, and he felt a sense of responsibility to carry this lesson beyond the room and treat quiet people with greater care and openness. And the woman playing remained inwardly focused yet subtly aware of the room, and she felt a gentle connection to the audience, not as a performer seeking response, but as a person sharing a moment of truth. And that awareness did not distract her but grounded her further. And the melody continued unfolding with patience, allowing space between phrases that felt like thoughtful pauses rather than silence. And the broken keys created gaps that she embraced, using them to shape the rhythm and emotional contour of the piece. And the audience landed into those moments of quiet, feeling invited rather than excluded. And the hall itself seemed to soften, holding the sound with warmth and clarity. And the woman remembered a time years earlier when she had briefly considered returning to music publicly, but chose not to because life required her presence elsewhere. And she remembered accepting that decision without resentment, trusting that music would remain with her regardless of circumstance. And that trust was evident now in the calm assurance of her playing, and the audience sensed a maturity that came from making peace with one's own choices. And that sense of peace resonated deeply. And the melody moved through variations that suggested challenge and adaptation, and listeners felt the subtle tension resolve into acceptance. And the teenage girl felt reassured that struggle did not negate meaning, and the carpenter felt affirmed in the value of perseverance. And the woman in the middle rows felt comforted by the recognition of shared experience, and the music teacher felt inspired to redefine success in his own life and work. and the man who had suggested the joke felt quietly transformed by the realization that humility opens doors to understanding. And the woman at the piano continued shaping the sound with intention, allowing emotion to surface naturally without exaggeration. And the broken piano offered tones that buzzed or faded unpredictably, and she adjusted seamlessly, meeting each sound with patience and respect. And the music carried a sense of continuity, connecting past, present, and acceptance into a cohesive whole. And the audience followed, attentively feeling carried along by the narrative expressed through sound. And the room felt unified in stillness and listening. And the woman felt a sense of alignment within herself, a feeling that she was exactly where she needed to be in that moment. And that realization brought a subtle warmth to the melody. And the audience responded with deeper attention, and the piece began to explore a theme of quiet courage expressed through steady progress rather than dramatic shifts, and listeners felt encouraged by the idea that strength could be gentle and persistent. And the teenage girl felt a new understanding of ambition rooted in integrity rather than recognition. And the music teacher felt reminded of why he first fell in love with music as a language of truth rather than competition, and the carpenter felt gratitude for the dignity of his work. And the woman in the middle rows felt seen and valued, and the man who had laughed felt resolved to listen more carefully in his daily life. And the woman playing felt none of this individually, yet sensed the collective presence through the stillness and focus of the room. And she allowed that shared energy to support her without altering her intention. And the melody grew slightly more expansive, not louder but more open, and the broken piano seemed to cooperate, offering its best within its limits. And the sound filled the hall with a sense of grounded warmth, and the woman remained centered, her posture relaxed, her movements confident yet restrained, and she allowed the music to breathe, trusting the listeners to remain with her, and they did. And as this part of the performance continued, the sense of time softened, and the gathering felt suspended between moments free from distraction and expectation. And the woman realized that this experience was not about proving talent, but about honoring a part of herself she had protected quietly for years, and that realization brought a gentle sense of fulfillment. She continued playing with that understanding guiding her hands, and the audience remained fully present, aware that they were witnessing something sincere and meaningful. And the music carried on naturally, preparing the way for what was to come, and the room held the sound with care, allowing it to resonate fully. And if any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content without them. As the music moved forward, the woman felt a gentle but undeniable shift, as if the story she was telling had reached a place of clarity, and was now ready to open outward. And the next passage carried a subtle brightness, not cheerful or triumphant, but quietly uplifting, like morning light entering a familiar room. And the audience sensed this change immediately, because the sound now carried a sense of release and forward motion, and the broken piano responded with a slightly clearer tone in the higher range. And she used it carefully, allowing the brighter notes to emerge without overpowering the grounded foundation she had built. And the melody suggested renewal, shaped by experience rather than innocence, and listeners felt a quiet hope rise within them, not the kind that ignores difficulty, but the kind that grows from understanding and acceptance. And the woman at the piano remained calm and centered, her hands moving with assurance that came from deep familiarity rather than display. And she remembered moments in her life when she had found small joys within routine, shared laughter, quiet evenings, simple achievements that never made headlines but carried meaning, and those memories informed the warmth now present in her playing. And the audience felt that warmth and responded instinctively with softer expressions, relaxed shoulders, and steady attention. And the carpenter felt a gentle lightness in his chest, as if the music acknowledged not only effort but also the quiet satisfaction that follows honest work. And the woman in the middle rows felt a sense of gratitude for the life she had built, even with its compromises. And she realized that fulfillment could exist alongside sacrifice. And the teenage girl felt inspired by a vision of adulthood that allowed for growth without losing integrity. And she watched the pianist with admiration rooted in respect rather than awe. And the music teacher felt a renewed sense of purpose, recognizing that music at its best offers understanding rather than competition. And he resolved to nurture that spirit in his students. And the man who had earlier laughed felt a deep humility settle within him as he recognized how easily people overlook depth when it arrives without announcement. And he felt grateful for the opportunity to witness something that challenged his assumptions. And the woman playing felt none of this individually, yet sensed a collective openness in the room. And she allowed that energy to support the unfolding of the music without altering her intention. And the melody grew slightly more fluid, introducing gentle variations that felt conversational, as if responding to an unseen presence, and the broken keys created occasional interruptions that she integrated seamlessly, allowing them to add texture rather than disruption. And the audience listened with growing ease, no longer holding tension or expectation, but simply receiving the sound, and the hall felt warmer, as if the shared experience had softened its edges. And the woman felt a sense of alignment between her inner world and the external moment. And that alignment brought a quiet joy that surprised her with its simplicity. And she allowed that joy to color the music subtly without turning it into performance. And the sound reflected this balance with clarity and grace, and listeners felt the shift and responded with faint smiles and relaxed expressions. And the teenage girl felt a spark of confidence, imagining a future where passion could coexist with responsibility. And the carpenter felt affirmed not only in his labor, but in the life he had built through consistency and care. And the woman in the middle rows felt a sense of closure regarding choices she had long questioned. And the Music teacher felt reminded that the deepest lessons are often unspoken, and the man who had suggested the joke felt resolved to approach others with more patience and curiosity. And the woman at the piano continued shaping the piece with intention, allowing earlier themes to reappear, now transformed by the journey they had taken. And the audience recognized these echoes, instinctively feeling the continuity of the story, and the broken piano responded with a mix of clear and rough tones, and she met each with equal respect, allowing the instrument to speak honestly, and the sound carried a sense of gratitude not directed outward, but felt inwardly. And the room seemed to share that feeling collectively, and the woman felt a quiet appreciation for the years she had spent nurturing her craft privately even when no one was watching, and she realized that those years had prepared her not for applause, but for authenticity, and that realization deepened her sense of peace. And the melody continued unfolding with gentle confidence. And the audience remained fully present, no longer surprised, but deeply engaged. And the initial circumstances that had brought her to the piano felt distant and irrelevant, replaced by a shared respect for the moment unfolding. And the woman allowed the music to explore a lighter register, briefly introducing tones that suggested curiosity and openness, and listeners felt encouraged by the sense of possibility embedded in the sound. And the teenage girl felt a renewed commitment to honor her interests with patience and honesty, and the music teacher felt inspired to listen more deeply to the quiet voices around him. And the carpenter felt grateful for the dignity of steady effort. And the woman in the middle rows felt seen and valued. And the man who had laughed felt transformed by the realization that humility creates space for understanding, and the woman playing felt a gentle connection to all of this without focusing on it, and she allowed the music to continue, naturally guided by instinct and experience. And the broken piano offered its imperfect voice, and she responded with patience and care, and the sound filled the hall with a sense of openness and calm, and the audience listened with ease and attentiveness, and the sense of time softened further, and the gathering felt suspended in a moment of shared presence. And the woman realized that this experience was not about reclaiming something lost, but about honoring something that had always been with her. And that realization brought a quiet gratitude that resonated through the music, and the audience felt it as a sense of completeness and connection. And as this part of the performance continued, the melody gently prepared for transition, not signaling an end, but suggesting that the story was approaching a place of resolution and understanding. And the room remained still and receptive, and the woman continued playing with clarity and restraint, allowing the music to guide both herself and the listeners forward, and the shared experience deepened, leaving an impression of sincerity and quiet strength that would remain long after the sound faded. And if any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content without them, as the music gently carried itself toward a more reflective space. The woman felt an awareness that the story she was sharing was nearing a point where everything she had expressed needed to come together, and she allowed her hands to slow slightly, not to signal an ending, but to invite a deeper listening, and the audience sensed this shift and leaned into the stillness with renewed focus, because the sound now carried a feeling of gathering and understanding, as if scattered thoughts were being drawn into a single clear meaning. And the broken piano responded with a softer voice, and she met it with careful touch, choosing notes that allowed warmth to emerge even through uneven tones. And the melody began to echo earlier themes, now woven together with a sense of wholeness, and listeners felt the familiarity and recognized the journey they had taken with her through sound and emotion. And the woman at the piano remained composed. Present her breathing steady, her posture relaxed, and she felt a calm confidence rooted not in performance but in truth. And she remembered the many moments in her life when she had doubted whether her quiet devotion to music had mattered. And in this moment she understood that value is not measured by visibility, and that realization shaped the gentleness and clarity of her playing. And the audience felt the sincerity immediately and responded with deep stillness and attention. And the carpenter, profound sense of peace, as if the music had placed his years of effort into a meaningful frame. And the woman in the middle rows felt a quiet release as lingering doubts softened and made space for acceptance. And the teenage girl felt reassured that a life does not need to be loud to be meaningful, and that patience and honesty can shape a future with depth and dignity. And the music teacher felt deeply moved by the integration of skill and life experience, recognizing that true artistry grows from living fully and listening deeply. And the man who had earlier laughed felt a lasting humility settle within him, and he realized that this lesson would stay with him beyond the evening, shaping how he viewed others and himself. And the woman playing sensed the collective presence of the room not as pressure, but as support, and she allowed that shared energy to guide the flow of the music without altering its integrity. And the melody unfolded with balance, blending light and shadow in a way that felt complete and honest, and the broken keys created gentle interruptions that she used to emphasize phrasing and emotion, turning limitation into expression. And the audience followed attentively, feeling included in the unfolding narrative, and the hall itself seemed to hold the sound with care and warmth. And the woman felt a subtle gratitude for the instrument despite its flaws, because it had allowed her to tell this story in a way that perfection never could, and the music reflected that gratitude with tenderness and restraint and listener. The depth of that emotion without needing explanation, and the teenage girl felt inspired to protect her own interests even when they were not understood by others. And the carpenter felt affirmed in the quiet pride of consistent effort, and the woman in the middle rows felt seen in her sacrifices and reassured that meaning can exist without recognition. And the music teacher felt renewed commitment to honor individuality and sincerity in his work, and the man who had suggested the joke felt quietly changed and resolved to approach life with greater curiosity and respect. And the woman at the piano continued shaping the music with patience, allowing each phrase to settle naturally. And the melody began to simplify, not losing depth, but gaining clarity, as if unnecessary weight had been released, and the audience felt this simplicity as a form of truth and responded with calm presence. And the room felt united in listening and understanding, and the woman felt a gentle sense of completion, not finality but integration, and she allowed that feeling to guide her hands, and the sound carried a quiet confidence that resonated deeply, and the broken piano offered its voice uneven yet sincere. And she met it with equal sincerity and respect. And the melody carried forward with a sense of readiness, suggesting that the journey was approaching a meaningful close, and the audience sensed this and remained attentive and open, and no one shifted or whispered because the moment felt too complete to interrupt, and they realized that this experience was not about reclaiming lost opportunity, but about honoring a lifelong relationship with music that had shaped her quietly and faithfully. And that realization brought her a deep sense of peace and gratitude. And the music reflected that inner state with warmth and clarity, and the listeners felt it as a shared understanding, and the teenage girl felt encouraged to define success on her own terms, and the carpenter felt contentment in the life he had built, and the middle rose felt affirmed in her choices, and the music teacher felt reminded of the power of authenticity, and the man who had laughed felt transformed by humility, and the woman playing felt all of this indirectly through the stillness and attention of the room. And she allowed the music to continue unfolding, naturally guided by instinct and experience, and the broken piano continued to respond within its limits, and she worked with it seamlessly, and the sound filled the hall with a sense of completeness and quiet strength, and the audience listened with gratitude and respect, aware that they were part of something rare and meaningful. And as this part of the performance progressed, the melody gently prepared for resolution, carrying a sense of closure that felt earned rather than imposed, and the room remained still and receptive, and the woman continued playing with calm assurance, allowing the music to speak clearly and honestly, and the shared experience deepened further, leaving an impression that would endure long after the final note. If any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content without them. She was known in her small town as a quiet, modest woman who kept to herself and worked long hours at a local tailoring shop, where the sound of old sewing machines and soft radio music filled her days, and where few people ever asked about her past or her dreams, because she never pushed herself forward or spoke loudly enough to invite curiosity. And on that particular evening, she attended a community gathering only because her neighbor insisted and promised it would be short and harmless. And she simple dress and kept her eyes low as she entered the old community hall, where laughter bounced off the walls, and where a dusty upright piano sat in the corner with several broken keys, and a history of being used more as a joke than an instrument. And the room was full of familiar faces, including teachers, shop owners, local artists, and a few visitors, and the mood was playful and careless, and someone mentioned the piano and laughed about how out of tune it was, and how no one could make it sound good anymore. And then someone noticed her standing quietly near the back, and without knowing anything about her life or her history, they invited her forward, not out of respect, but out of amusement, because she looked shy and harmless and unlikely to refuse. And the suggestion that she play the broken piano was followed by light laughter and a few encouraging claps that carried a teasing edge, and she hesitated for a moment, feeling the old weight in her chest that she had learned to live with for years, a weight formed from memories she rarely shared, memories of another life where music once meant everything. And she glanced at the piano, noticing the chipped wood, the yellowed keys, and the missing notes. And she felt both fear and familiarity, because broken instruments had always been part of her journey. And as she walked toward it, the room quieted slightly, not out of respect but curiosity. And she sat down, slowly adjusting the bench that wobbled under her weight, and she placed her hands in her lap and took a breath, steady and controlled, the way she had taught herself during long nights when music was the only way she could survive. And she touched the keys, gently testing the sound. And some keys worked, some did not, and a few produced harsh tones that made people smile and whisper. And yet she did not smile or apologize or explain. And instead she closed her eyes briefly, not in drama but in concentration and memory. And in that moment she was no longer the quiet tailor or the modest neighbor, but a woman remembering a childhood filled with melodies played on a much finer piano in a small house where her mother sang while cooking and her father listened quietly after work. And those memories flooded back, not as a performance, but as a grounding force. And she adjusted her hands, finding the keys that still responded and mapping the broken ones in her mind the way she always had when life gave her imperfect tools. And she began to play slowly, choosing notes, carefully weaving around the damaged sounds, and shaping a melody that fit the instrument. Then fighting it, and the first few moments were met with mild surprise as the expected noise did not come, and instead a gentle tune filled the hall, uneven but intentional. And people stopped whispering and leaned in without realizing it, and the laughter faded, replaced by confusion, and then attention as the music grew more confident and her hands moved with purpose, not flashy, not loud, but deeply controlled and expressive. And with each measure she adapted, adjusting tempo and harmony to accommodate missing notes, creating something new from what remained. And the room shifted as people who had come to laugh found themselves listening, and those who had invited her as a joke now watched her posture, her calm focus, and the emotion that slowly surfaced in the music. And she did not look up or seek approval, and she did not play to impress but to express something long held inside. And the broken piano seemed to respond, as if relieved to be understood, and the sound, though imperfect, carried warmth and honesty, and the continued playing, drawing from years of silent practice and private grief and resilience, shaped by loss and responsibility and sacrifice. And the music told a story without words of perseverance, of beauty shaped by hardship, and of grace found in humility. And as the first part of her playing unfolded, the room had fully transformed from casual noise to shared stillness, and no one remembered anymore that this had begun as a joke, and no one thought about the broken keys or the old bench, and all eyes were on her hands and all ears were tuned to the sound she created. And in that moment, the foundation was laid for a truth that would soon become impossible to ignore: that talent does not always announce itself, and that sometimes the most powerful voices belong to those who have learned to be quiet. And that this evening would mark the beginning of a story the room would remember long after the last note faded. And if any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content without them as the melody continued to flow through the hall. Change in the room became more visible in the smallest human reactions. People who had been leaning against walls slowly straightened their posture. Those who held cups of tea forgot to sip, and a few who had been smiling with amusement now wore expressions of quiet focus and disbelief. Because the sound coming from the piano no longer matched the idea they had formed in their minds, and the woman playing did not rush or exaggerate her movements. Instead, she played with restraint, allowing space between phrases and shaping each section with care, as if she were speaking to the instrument in a private language learned long ago. And the broken keys no longer felt like obstacles, but like boundaries she understood well and knew how to work around. And as the tune developed, it began to reveal layers of emotion: sadness, hope, patience, and a subtle strength that did not demand attention but earned it. And a few people in the front rows exchanged glances, not to mock, but to silently ask each other if they were hearing the same thing. And one older man who had lived in the town his entire life and considered himself knowledgeable about music slowly removed his glasses and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, because he recognized the discipline in her playing, a discipline that could not be learned casually or recently. And near the back, a teenage girl who had been scrolling on her phone lowered it and stared openly at the woman at the piano, because the music felt honest in a way that surprised her and reminded her of feelings she did not yet have words for. And the room itself seemed to soften, the harsh echo of earlier laughter replaced by a warm stillness that allowed the sound to breathe. And the woman remained unaware of these changes, or perhaps she sensed them, but chose not to engage because her attention was fully inside the music and inside memories that guided her fingers, memories of years when she practiced alone after everyone slept, using a keyboard with uneven volume and sticky keys, because it was all she could afford. And she remembered teaching herself to adapt, because perfection was never an option and expression was the only goal. And that same philosophy shaped her playing now, as she moved into a second section, slightly faster but still controlled. And the melody grew richer, supported by simple harmonies that avoided the damaged keys and turned limitation into character. And the piano responded with a voice that was imperfect yet sincere, and the audience began to understand that they were not witnessing a trick or a lucky moment, but the presence of deep experience quietly revealed. And a woman seated near the middle felt her throat tighten, because the music reminded her of a sister she had lost, someone who used to play late into the night without ever performing for others. And she wiped her eyes, discreetly surprised by her own reaction. And another listener, a young man who taught music lessons at the local school, found himself mentally tracing the structure of the piece, noticing how the transitions were intentional and how the phrasing showed maturity rather than showmanship. And he realized that the performer was not trying to prove anything, and that realization alone made the performance powerful. And as the woman continued, her hands moved with growing confidence, not louder, not faster, but steadier, as if she had fully settled into the space and accepted the instrument for what it was, and accepted the audience without acknowledging them. And the piano bench creaked slightly as she shifted her weight, but she adjusted seamlessly, never breaking the flow. The melody reached a point where the broken keys created gaps that might have ruined the piece for someone less experienced, but she allowed silence to exist there, using pauses that felt natural rather than empty. And those moments of quiet drew the listeners in even more, because they felt intentional, like breaths taken between thoughts. And the crowd now listened as one collective body, no whispers, no movement, only the shared experience of listening to something unexpected and sincere. And a man who had earlier laughed the loudest felt a slow burn of embarrassment, not because he was being judged, but because he realized how quickly he had underestimated someone based on appearance and silence. And he shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with his earlier assumptions, and yet grateful for the chance to witness something rare. And as the music moved toward a gentle peak, the emotional weight became clearer. The melody carried resilience rather than triumph, a sense of having endured rather than conquered, and it resonated deeply with people who had lived quiet lives filled with responsibility and unrecognized effort. And the woman at the piano embodied that truth without words. And as she played, she thought not of the audience but of moments in her own life when music had been her refuge after long days of work and sacrifice, when she played softly so as not to disturb others, and when she chose stability over ambition for reasons she never explained. And those choices lived in her hands now, shaping each note with care and humility. And the room seemed to understand even without knowing the details, and the performance reached a point of stillness, where the melody simplified, returning to a theme introduced earlier, now softer and more reflective. And the listeners felt as though they had traveled somewhere and were being gently guided back. And when the final notes of this section faded into silence, there was no immediate reaction, not because it was unappreciated, but because the moment felt too full to interrupt and the woman held her hands above the keys for a brief moment, allowing the sound to settle, and the room remained quiet, not out of instruction but respect. And in that silence, something important had shifted. The woman was no longer an object of curiosity or humor, but a presence acknowledged and valued. And though the performance was not yet finished, the foundation of recognition had been laid, and the audience now waited not for entertainment but for continuation and understanding. And if any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content without them. The silence that followed lingered longer than anyone expected. And during that quiet, the woman remained seated with her hands resting lightly near the keys, not frozen, but calm, as if she were listening to something only she could hear. And the audience held their breath unconsciously because the moment felt fragile and meaningful, and no one wanted to disturb it. And then, without lifting her head or acknowledging the room, she began again, this time with a different tone, softer at first but more complex, and the melody unfolded with a sense of intention that suggested a deeper chapter of her story. And the piano, despite its flaws, seemed to accept her direction, responding with tones that blended warmth and roughness in a way that felt honest rather than distracting. And the listeners, now fully engaged, followed every movement of her hands, noticing how she avoided certain keys instinctively and leaned into others with confidence built from long familiarity. And the music carried a narrative quality, as if it were speaking in sentences rather than notes, and people began to sense that this was not a rehearsed performance meant for applause but a personal expression shaped by years of quiet endurance and sacrifice. And in the front row, a woman clasped her hands together tightly, because the music stirred something unresolved within her, a reminder of dreams she had set aside without ceremony. And she felt both comforted and unsettled by the recognition. And near the side wall, a man who worked as a carpenter found himself thinking of his own hands and the way years of labor had shaped them, and he felt a strange kinship with the pianist, because he understood what it meant to work with imperfect tools and still take pride in the result. And the woman at the piano continued building the piece, allowing it to rise and fall naturally, never forcing emotion, but letting it surface when it belonged. And the broken piano keys became part of the texture, adding unexpected edges that gave the melody character and authenticity. And as she played, she remembered moments from her past, not as distractions, but as anchors, memories of her youth, when she studied music seriously under a teacher who recognized her sensitivity rather than just her technical ability, and encouraged her to listen as much as she played and to respect silence as much as sound. And those lessons guided her now as she shaped phrases with patience and restraint. And she remembered the day she had to stop formal lessons, not because she lacked talent, but because life demanded practical choices and family responsibilities took priority. And she remembered the quiet acceptance that followed, not bitterness, but a decision to carry music privately rather than publicly. And that choice had defined much of her adult life, and the audience, unaware of these details, still felt the weight of them through the music, because authenticity carries its own language. And as the performance continued, the room felt smaller, more intimate, as if the walls had moved closer to hold the sound. And people leaned in, not physically but emotionally, allowing themselves to be present in a way that everyday life rarely permits. And the teenage girl near the back felt a lump in her throat because she suddenly imagined a future where she too might have to choose between passion and obligation, and the thought frightened her and inspired her at the same time. And she watched the pianist closely, noticing her composed posture and the way she seemed at peace with herself despite the intensity of what she was expressing. And the music teacher in the room began to realize that this woman possessed not only skill, but wisdom, a maturity that comes from living with music rather than performing it. And he felt humbled by the realization that some of the most profound musicians never stand on stages or seek recognition. And he made a quiet promise to himself to listen more closely to his students, not just to how they played, but to who they were. And the carpenter wiped his eyes quickly, surprised by his own emotion, and told himself it was just the music, but deep down he knew it was the reflection of his own unspoken experiences. And the woman playing remained centered, her breathing steady, her shoulders relaxed, and her hands moved with a balance of confidence and gentleness. And as the piece progressed, she introduced subtle variations, returning to earlier themes, but altering them slightly, as if acknowledging change and growth and loss and acceptance all at once. And the broken piano responded unevenly, at times producing notes that faded too quickly, but she adjusted seamlessly, allowing those imperfections to become part of the story rather than interruptions. And the audience, now fully invested, no longer thought about how this performance had begun or why she had been invited, and the initial laughter felt distant and irrelevant, replaced by a shared sense of respect and gratitude. And the man who had earlier suggested she play as a joke now sat with his hands clasped tightly between his knees, his face flushed with regret and admiration. And he realized that he had mistaken quietness for weakness and modesty for lack of substance. And that realization stayed with him as a lesson he would carry beyond this evening. And the music reached a section that felt heavier, deeper, and more introspective, and the melody slowed, allowing each note to linger and resonate. And the room felt the weight of unspoken sorrow, not dramatic or overwhelming, but steady and real, like the kind that accompanies long responsibility and unacknowledged effort. And the woman playing allowed that emotion to exist without embellishment, trusting the listeners to meet her there, and they did. And a few people closed their eyes, not out of performance etiquette, but because the music invited inward reflection, and the hall filled with a sense of shared humanity that transcended age, occupation, and background. And for a brief time, everyone present felt connected through the honesty of sound. and the woman at the piano thought of nights when she played alone after exhausting days when music was not a career dream but a necessity, a way to release feelings she could not speak aloud. And those private moments had shaped her voice more than any stage ever could, and she realized without surprise that this performance felt similar not because of the audience, but because she was once again playing truthfully and without expectation, and that realization brought her a quiet sense of fulfillment. And as the piece began to transition toward resolution, the melody lightened slightly, not in triumph, but in clarity, suggesting acceptance rather than victory, and the audience sensed the shift and felt a collective release, as if a weight had been acknowledged and gently set down. And the piano, though still imperfect, seemed almost cooperative, as if honoring the intention behind each note, and the woman allowed the final section to unfold with simplicity, resisting the urge to impress or conclude dramatically. And instead she chose honesty, letting the music end the way it needed to end, with grace and restraint. And as the last notes of this part faded into the air, she did not immediately lift her hands or look up, and the room remained silent once more, not tense but full. And no one felt the urge to clap yet, because it still felt like a conversation rather than a performance. And in that silence, the truth became clear to everyone present that they were witnessing something rare, not because of technical brilliance alone, but because of the courage to be genuine in a public space. And the woman at the piano embodied that courage quietly and completely. And though the story was still unfolding, the third part had deepened the connection between performer and audience, transforming a casual gathering into a moment of shared understanding that none of them would forget easily. And the room waited patiently, aware now that the music was not something to interrupt but something to receive. And if any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content. Without them, the woman sensed that the music had reached a point where it needed to move forward rather than linger. And with that awareness, she adjusted her posture slightly, grounding herself more firmly on the bench, and allowing her shoulders to relax even further. And the next section began with a steady rhythm that felt more deliberate, carrying a sense of movement, like walking a familiar path after standing still for a long time. And the audience felt the change immediately, because the music now carried momentum, not urgency but direction, and the broken piano responded unevenly yet faithfully. And she worked within its limits with the ease of someone accustomed to navigating difficulty without complaint. And the melody suggested a journey shaped by routine, responsibility, and quiet persistence, and listeners began to imagine scenes from their own lives reflected in the sound: early mornings, late nights, repetitive tasks, and the silent satisfaction of endurance. And the woman playing was fully present in this section, her hands moving with confidence earned over years of discipline and restraint. And she remembered how music had followed her through every stage of her life, not as a spotlight, but as a companion during times when recognition was neither expected nor desired. And she remembered practicing quietly while others rested, choosing pieces that matched her emotional state rather than those that impressed. And those habits shaped her playing now, giving it a grounded honesty that resonated deeply with the room. And the audience continued to listen with growing respect and attentiveness. And even those who had no formal understanding of music could feel the intention behind each phrase, and the carpenter noticed the rhythm reminded him of the steady pace of his work. And he felt a sense of dignity reflected back at him, and the woman in the middle rows, who had earlier felt unsettled, now felt calmer, as if the music acknowledged her choices without judging them, and offered a form of reassurance that value exists even in unseen effort. And the teenage girl watched intently, feeling inspired not by fame or applause, but by the possibility of remaining true to oneself. Time and the music teacher felt a renewed sense of purpose, recognizing that technical instruction mattered less than nurturing sincerity and patience. And the man who had laughed earlier now listened with humility, his earlier embarrassment transformed into gratitude for the lesson unfolding before him. And the woman at the piano continued shaping the music with subtle shifts in tempo, allowing it to breathe naturally. And the broken keys created occasional rough edges that she embraced rather than avoided, and those imperfections made the piece feel lived in rather than polished. And the melody grew slightly fuller, supported by simple chords that provided stability. And the hall seemed to hold the sound gently, and people leaned into the experience without realizing it, and the sense of shared attention deepened. And the woman felt a quiet connection to the audience, not as performers and listeners, but as people meeting in a moment of honesty. And she thought of how often she had hidden this part of herself, not out of fear, but practicality, and how music had become something private and protected. And now, without planning it, she was sharing it openly. And the realization brought a mix of vulnerability and calm acceptance. And she allowed that feeling to guide her hands, and the music reflected it with warmth and clarity. And the audience felt the authenticity immediately, and responded with stillness and presence rather than noise and movement. And the room felt suspended in time, free from the usual distractions of social expectation and small talk. And the woman continued building toward a section that felt hopeful, not in a dramatic sense, but in a grounded way, like the quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are and accepting where you are. And the melody lifted slightly, introducing brighter tones that suggested moments of joy found in ordinary life. And people smiled softly without realizing it, and a few exchanged glances filled with shared understanding. And the teenage girl felt a spark of courage, imagining a future where she could honor both responsibility and passion. And the music teacher felt inspired to rethink how success was defined. And the carpenter felt pride in the value of steady work. And the woman in the middle rows felt seen and validated, and the man who had suggested the joke felt resolved to be more mindful, and the woman at the piano remained focused, her breathing steady, her movements economical and expressive. And she allowed the music to unfold without rushing toward a conclusion, and the broken piano continued to offer its imperfect voice, and she met it with patience and respect. And the sound carried through the hall, filling it with a sense of warmth and quiet strength. And as this part of the performance continued, the audience no longer felt like observers, but participants sharing a collective experience shaped by sincerity and mutual recognition. And the woman sensed that the story she was telling through sound was being received and understood even without words, and that realization brought her a sense of peace she had not expected. And she continued playing with renewed clarity, allowing the music to speak for itself, and the room remained fully engaged, aware that something meaningful was still unfolding, and that this moment would linger in memory long after the gathering ended. And if any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content without them.